Claire, you're on mute. All right, well, Claire.
You should be able to unmute. There you go.
There she is.
Okay, there we go. All right. Welcome, everybody, on this Monday. Clearly, Mercury's still in retrograde or something happening here, but we're glad you can all join us for Knitting 103 today. My name is Claire. I'll be hanging out in your chat here, answering any questions there, or forwarding them on to Darren, who's your teacher there on screen. He's modeling the mittens that you'll have all the skills to make after this class. There's the cowl that we learned in Knitting 101, and there's the hat that we learned last week. So after this class, you'll be able to make yourself a full winter accessory set. Just a reminder that this class is being recorded, and so you'll be able to watch it back again and again on the Michael's YouTube channel. That'll be posted in about 24 to 48 hours. If you need the handout for the class, I'll be putting that in the chat as well. Just a reminder that if you have questions over the course of class, please use the chat and I will take care of them or forward them to Darren. And now that all that's out of the way, we'll finally let him get started.
Welcome to class, everyone. Sorry about all the technical difficulties, but hopefully we've worked through. We'll have to see what happens. So today is Knitting 103. We're going to learn how to make increases and decreases. And at the end of class, we're going to review the pattern that will instruct you on how to make this pair of mittens. So we're not making these in class. We're just going to learn. We're going to learn the skills that you will need to make these. So it's an exciting class. Let's go ahead and switch to the view of my hands and we'll go ahead and get started. Okay, there we go. Okay, so today I am working with Hometown Bonus Bundle. And this is available on lionbrand.com, also on michaels.com. And I'm using the color Dallas Gray. And this is a number 6 yarn. It's a bulky weight. And so it's a great yarn to work with. I like to teach with this yarn because it shows up pretty good on camera. So we'll see how it does today. Sometimes I have better luck than others with that. So last week, we learned how to do the purl stitch, and this week we're going to be learning how to do increases and decreases. So if you have a copy of the handout, I'm not going to follow the exercise that's in the handout during class today, because that handout was written for a class that was 2.5 hours long, and the students had lots of time to practice. So today I'm just going to be demonstrating all of the techniques, and then if you want to do the exercise at your leisure, then you can do that. It's a great practicing tool. So I just cast on, I think I have like 25 stitches. I just knitted a couple of rows to give me something to work into. And I'm just gonna start with the increases and decreases. So if you wanna follow along, just cast on as many stitches as you want, maybe 10 or 15, and just knit one row and then you can start going with me. So that's what I'm working with today. So the first one I'm going to show you is called knit in the front and back of the loop, and it's abbreviated KFNB. So it's knit in the front and the back. And this stitch takes 1 stitch and turns it into 2 stitches. So you'll be increasing by 1 every time you do this technique. So I'm going to just knit 1 stitch, or just knit a couple just to kind of get into my work. You can do this on the very edge, but for demonstrating purposes, I wanted to kind of work in. So for knit front and back, the first thing you do is you start it as a regular knit stitch. So you enter the stitch, wrap the yarn, and then you bring it through, and you're going to stop right here. You're going to stop right there. And we're going to look at this, and we're going to see that there is a loop. This loop of yarn goes over my knitting needle. So I've got the front leg of this loop, And if you turn it over, then you've got the back leg of that loop. So you've got the back leg and the front leg that you're working with. So I knitted through the front loop as we usually do. So now I'm going to knit through the back loop. So I'm going to turn my needle so you can see. You wouldn't normally turn your needle like this when you're doing it. So I'm going to knit through the back loop, wrap my yarn, bring it through, and now coming out of that stitch, I have two loops, two strands of yarn, because now I have two stitches, and then I transfer it over. Okay, so I'm going to do that again. I'm just going to go ahead and do it like I normally would, so you can kind of see what it looks like in real life. And it's, once you get the hang of it, it's actually pretty easy. And then just transfer it over. So you enter the stitch, wrap the yarn, bring the loop through, stop right here, swing your needle to the back, and this is something new. We probably haven't done this before. Enter the back loop, go through that back leg, wrap your needle, bring it through, and transfer it over. Okay, is that making any sense? Is there a certain spot you want to see again? Are you able to find that back loop? So the back leg is right there. That's the back. So here's the front of the loop, and here is the back of the loop. And we're going just through the back, through that back loop, wrap it, bring it through, and we take one stitch and turn it into two stitches. And when we do this with this type of an increase, what happens is you get this little bump right here, and it almost looks like a pro bump. So you can kind of see here, 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 and here, I have those little bumps. And that's, people look at that and think they've done something wrong, but that's what happens. That, I say, it's like a little tattletale. That tells us that something happened there. And it can help you keep track of how many increases you've done and where you've done them. So you can kind of go back and count those bumps to keep track of where you are in the pattern, okay? Any questions at all?
Can you show it with holding the yarn in your right hand?
My right hand? And so holding it in the right or the left hand, you still do it exactly the same way. So you enter the stitch, wrap the yarn, bring it through, and then we're going to stop right here, swing it around to the back, go through the back loop, wrap your yarn, and then bring it through. And now I'm going to transfer it over. So show it again with my right hand. Enter the stitch, wrap the yarn, bring it through, swing to the back, go through the back leg of the same loop, wrap my yarn, bring it through, and then transfer it over. Okay. Any questions? Were you able to find that back leg all right? Sometimes it's hard to find that. A lot of people don't realize there is a back loop, but yeah, there's a front loop and a back loop. So how are we doing? Any questions?
I think we're doing good.
Are we ready to see another one? The next one I want to demonstrate is called Make One. We ready to go to that? Ready? Okay, let's do it. So when we did knit front and back, we took one stitch and we turned it into two stitches. So that's how we got our increase. We took one stitch and turned it into two. And so for Make One, we're just going to make a stitch where there was no stitch. So we're just like magic, we're going to put a stitch where there was no stitch. So I've got my stitch here, and I've got my next stitch on my left-hand needle. But what we're going to be looking at is this space in between the needles. Now I'm going to stretch my fabric so you can see, but you wouldn't want to do this on your fabric because it'll stretch it out and distort your stitches. but I want you to be able to see that there are these ladders, these kind of bars or rungs of a ladder that run in your knitting if you stretch it apart. And I'm going to use that top rung of the ladder to create a stitch. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my left hand needle, I'm going to bring it back and point it to myself. And then on the way back up, I'm going to go under that bar and scoop it up. So now I've got that bar is looped around the needle. And just so you know, and keep this in mind, anytime you have a strand of yarn looped around your needle, you have the opportunity to turn that into a stitch. And sometimes you want to, and sometimes that's a mistake that can happen. So, but anytime you have a strand of yarn over your needle, it could be turned into a stitch, and that's what we're going to do. You don't want, you might feel like you're just going to go ahead and knit that like normal, but because of the nature of this stitch, if we do that, it'll create this very large hole. So what we're going to do is we're going to knit that through the back loop. So now that we've had experience knitting through the back loop with the KF and B, we're just going to go right through that back loop, wrap my yarn, oops, bring it through and transfer it over. And what happens, because we're knitting it through the back loop, it creates a twisted stitch. And that twisted stitch is going to be much tighter, and it will cause that little hole to close up. So, and you can see, even I had it all stretched open, you really don't see a hole there. So it actually works really good. It's a really nice way. So let me demonstrate it again. So you take your left-hand needle, you point it towards yourself, bring it towards you, and then on the way back, you're going to scoop up that bar. And now that it's on my hook, now it's on my needle, I can just go ahead and knit it like a regular stitch, only I'm going to knit through the back. Knit through the back loop, and then transfer it over. Okay. So I'm going to do, are there any questions, first of all, before I go on? I was going to show you some things, but let's just rest right here for a second. And if there are any questions, I'll be glad to take them right now. Okay, questions?
We do have a couple questions. Someone clearly has a little bit of experience because they're asking if this is an M1L or an M1R.
So this is a make one left. And usually if your pattern says to do a make one, this is the one they're probably referring to. If they want you to do a make one right, they'll say, you know, make one right, or they'll specify. But usually if it says just make one, then this is usually the one they will want you to do, and it is a left-leaning one. Any other questions? Are we able to find the bar? Sometimes students have a hard time finding this bar. Are you able to see that if you have any work in front of you, or have you maybe seen that before, noticed it? All right, so
Oh, we did have another question.
okay.
Let me scroll back a little here. Kathy wanted to know in which situation you would use a knit front and back versus a make one.
Usually your pattern will tell you. The designer will have made that decision for you. So if you're following a pattern, then it will tell you to make one or knit front and back of the loop. But if you're just designing your own, a make one, as you can see here, is you really can't see where I did it. I can tell I did it right there. But if you're just looking at it, it's almost completely invisible. The knit front and back of the loop, however, always causes this very visible bump. So if the increase is someplace on your garment where it's going to show, like if you're increasing across the front of a sweater for shoulders, then you might not want these random little bumps, you know, just showing up on the front of your sweater. But sometimes they can be arranged in a straight line, like a diagonal line, and actually make a design. So it just depends on what you're doing. But usually the make one is used because it's invisible, and then the knit front and back is used if you want to use that little bump as a design, or if you don't mind seeing. Does that help? Does that answer that question?
Yeah, I think that's a good answer.
Okay.
And we did have another question. Is there an easy way to remember how to do a make one left versus a make one right?
Well, let's just look at the
I've got a way if you don't have
Okay,
one.
I have a secret way too, but go ahead. Yours is probably better.
I was going to say, at least for an M1 right, so a make one right, I always remember that my needle tip has to be pointing out on the right side of the fabric, because typically you're increasing on a right side row. And so your needle tip is going to end up on that right side of the fabric for a make
Like
one
this.
right.
So for the make one right, you take your left needle and you scoop that stitch up immediately. So you kind of go under it and you scoop it up. And as Claire was saying, then your needle is facing on the right side of your fabric. So it's going to be a make one right. And then when you do a make one right, you're going to knit through the front of the loop because depending on the way you pick up the stitch, you just want to make sure when you knit it, it is actually twisted. So when you do a make one right, you knit through the front. And if you're not sure if you did it right or correct, do your make one, knit one stitch, and then look and see if it looks good or if there's a hole. I'm going to do one incorrectly so that you can see how it looks if it's incorrect. So I'm going to do a make one left. I'm going to knit through the front of the loop, which is incorrect. Transfer it over. I'll knit one stitch just to kind of see where I am. Stop. And you can see it creates that big hole. So you did not do it right. Whereas over here, where I was doing them, there are no holes. But when you get to here, so you know you didn't do it. So you can kind of stop and check yourself before you go on too far. Okay. So when you're doing a make one, you come, I'm going to do a make one left. You bring it forward and then you push, you pick up that loop on the way back. And sometimes we're kind of fussing with our knitting and we might tend, I've seen students, they tend to pull it this way. And then when you go back to find that back loop, there's almost no back loop back there because you've pulled your whole strand of yarn forward. So if you're having a hard time finding that back loop, just relax, let some of that slack move to the back. And now you can see there's plenty of yarn back there for the back loop and you can go ahead and knit that and pick it up. So sometimes I've seen students do that where it is hard to find the back loop, okay? Any questions at all about knit front and back and make one? So make one creates a new stitch where there was no stitch, and knit front and back takes one stitch and turns it into two stitches. Okay? How are we doing?
That's a good way to explain the difference between those two increases.
Yeah. Any questions, Claire? How are we doing out there? I feel like there should be questions.
Okay. So someone says, do you pick up the yarn exactly the same way, whether it's a make one left or make one right?
No. So from make one left, that's what we are talking about. From make one right, you take your left hand needle and you bring it under the bar and your tip of your needle becomes onto the right side of your fabric. So if I go under the bar, the tip of my needle is now on the right side of the fabric. That is a make one right. And a make one left, we bring the needle towards us. We point it towards yourself. And then on the way back, we pick up that loop. So that's how we do it differently. So for a make one right, we scoop under it straight away and our needle is on the right side of our fabric when we're ready to do our stitch. And a make one left, we bring our needle towards us, we move our needle this way, and then we don't scoop up the strand until we're on our way back. And then we scoop it up and now our needle is not on the right side of the fabric. So that's how you can tell the difference. But mostly, I don't know if I've ever done a make one right. I don't think I have. Have you? I guess you, Claire does much more complicated projects than I do, so she probably has. But
Yes, someone was asking when you might use that, and I was going to say if you get into knitting sweaters, especially sweaters from the top down, you'll often use both a make one left and a make one right in the same pattern because they lean
okay,
different ways, and so it just looks a little bit neater along your raglan increase.
I take it all back. I have done them, but I usually do the Icelandic style sweater with the yoke so that it doesn't come into play with that. So, okay, any other questions? How do we feel? Ready to see some decreases?
I think we're feeling good.
Feeling good? All right. So what we've been doing now is we've been adding stitches. So we've been increasing our stitch count, and you want to do that if you want to make your item larger for some reason. So you're making it larger, you add stitches, and that's an increase. So now we're going to decrease, we're going to take stitches away, and we're going to make our item smaller. And sometimes when you are doing this in the middle of a project, in the middle of a row, it doesn't only make your item smaller, but it can also add shaping and cause it to curve or cause your fabric to be shaped in different ways. And so that's another reason why you frequently do increases and decreases. It changes the shape of your fabric. So it's not a piece of fabric now that's just laying flat. It's going to be doing some other things. So for a decrease, the first decrease I'm going to show you is called slip, slip, knit, right? So let me show it to you first, and then we'll talk a little bit about it. So you slip as if to knit, slip as if to knit. So I've slipped 2 stitches, and then you take your left hand needle and you insert that through the front of the stitches like this, and then you wrap your yarn and bring it through both. And that creates a stitch, and it leans, that's to the left, right, Claire? Because I'm never sure about left and right. So that leans to the left.
Correct.
Okay. So I'm dyslexic and I always mix it up. So I always have to double check. Okay. So I'm going to demonstrate this again, and we'll do it a couple of times. So you take your right hand needle, you enter the stitch as if to knit. So as if to knit, you slip, slip, and then the left hand needle. Usually you don't use the left hand needle to insert, but this time it gets to have a little extra activity. So you use the left hand needle, it gets to go through both loops, and then you wrap your right hand needle and pull it through. So I want to talk a little bit about slipping stitches, because a lot of people learn this stitch, and this is sometimes the first experience you may have with slipping stitches. And when you're doing the SSK, the slip, slip, knit, you slip as if to knit, slip as if to knit. So you enter the stitch as if to knit and slip it over. And you can see what that does is that if you look really close, when I slip that over, it causes it to twist. So this leg was the back leg, and now it's twisted to the front. Usually when a pattern tells you to slip a stitch, so if the pattern just says like knit one, slip one or something, usually you want to slip as if to purl. So you enter the stitch as if to purl and then slip it over. And you can see when I do that, it doesn't change the stitch mount and it doesn't twist it. So enter the stitch as if to purl, transfer it over. So that's how you do a standard slipping of a stitch. But we're not doing a standard slipping of a stitch. We're doing an SSK. So we're doing it a little, it's a special situation with the SSK. So with the SSK, you slip as if to knit, slip as if to knit, enter both of those loops, wrap your yarn, and bring it through. Okay, let's rest here for just one moment, and I'll see if there are any questions. What questions do we have about SSK?
We do have another request for you to do it with the yarn in your right hand, so we can see how that looks as well.
So slip as if to knit, slip as if to knit, enter both stitches, and then you wrap your yarn, bring it through. So this one was hard for me to learn for some reason. Every time I had to do this, I had to watch a video first. I don't know why, but it just, the first time I did it, this is what I did. It said slip, slip, knit. So I did slip, slip, knit. And I was like, that doesn't seem like I made a decrease. How is that a decrease? Well, it's not a decrease, right? Because I didn't do it right. So, these things can be a little tricky. So if you have to watch a video or review it a couple of times, don't feel discouraged. All right. Any other questions about slip, slip, knit? We're taking 2 stitches, turning them into 1 stitch, and they tend to, this one leans to the left.
Well, you're not alone in having done it the wrong way first, Darren. So
Did you do it that way too, Claire?
no, someone in the
Oh.
chat has confessed to it.
Okay. When I learned to knit, I didn't know anyone that knew how to knit. Nobody in my family knits, and I didn't have a teacher, so I was teaching myself. And I had knitting for dummies. This was before YouTube was like super popular, so I didn't have YouTube. So yeah, there were many mistakes were made. So are we ready to see knit 2 together? We're done with slip, slip, knit. There are no questions.
Let's see that one more time before we move on to knit 2 together.
So slip as if to knit, slip as if to knit, enter with your left hand needle, bring it through the front of both of those loops, both of those stitches, create the X, wrap your yarn just like normal, and then bring it through. And that is SSK. And after you do it a couple of times, it really is very easy. I don't know why, I just really struggled with it. But again, I was teaching myself, so I never knew for sure if I was doing it right. So, all right, so knit 2 together is very easy. It's very straightforward. So normally if I were knitting, I would just enter this stitch right here and just knit like normal. But knit 2 together, you enter the second stitch and you go through both stitches. Make sure you do go through both, and then you just knit them together. So knit 2 together. So enter the second stitch, and it can be a little tight sometimes. If it's a little too tight, if it's hard for you to do, put your finger on the tip of your needle, and you could kind of advance those stitches down closer to the tip because there'll be a little bit more room down there because the needle gets smaller, but don't let them fall off. And then go through both. So you see how I'm holding them with my finger. I'm not letting them fall off. Go through both. And then, whoops, see, they're trying to fall off. Wrap your yarn and bring it through both. But it's a good idea to get in the habit of like guarding the tips of your needles with your fingers. Any questions about that? That one's pretty straightforward.
Can you just demonstrate that one as well with the yarn in your right hand?
Yep. So usually after people who are struggled with slip, slip, knit, when I show them knit 2 together, they're usually quite happy that it's so easy. Okay. You're starting out like normal. Enter the second stitch from the end. Go through both. Make sure you do go through both. Wrap your yarn and bring it back through. Transfer it over. Jump over 2 stitches, enter the second stitch, enter the first stitch, wrap your yarn, and then bring it through both, transfer it over. And this one leans to the right. So, there's that. Any questions really about anything we've done today? Do we want to see anything else?
So why would you use, since the knit two together seems so much easier, why would you use slip, slip, knit?
Well, that one is, I've seen that one more with raglan sweaters. If you're working from the bottom up, so you start, sometimes with a sweater, you can do it from the top down, you can do it from the bottom up. So if you're working from the bottom, from your waist up to the neck, so you're going up, you're knitting a raglan sweater, that as you get past the armholes, you're going to have to start decreasing to close up this, to close up the sweater for your neck, right? So you use the different, they lean and slant in different directions. So that's why, because you're going to have those diagonal lines like right in the front of your garment, from like your neck down to like almost to your underarm. So you want to make sure that the stitches look nice and very neat, because that becomes part of the style, the raglan shaping, and it needs to look like really, really nice and very crisp. So having the stitches leaning the correct way that's usually the most time, I guess, in lace too, because if you do it different ways in lace, it's really going to change the way the fabric looks. So how about you, Claire? How often do you use them for different purposes?
Yeah, I was gonna say, for raglan sweaters, that you're decreasing in the raglan, and a lot of times in lace, because you'll need to have your stitches pointing a certain direction for that lace motif to look pretty.
Yeah.
And then also I use slip, slip, knit in my heel turns when I'm knitting socks.
Okay. Any other questions about anything we've talked about today? No questions?
Oh, someone also pointed out that your slip, slip, knit, it can sometimes lay a little bit flatter, or maybe if your knit two together lays a little bit flatter, depending upon how you knit. And so it just might look better in sort of a sea of stockinette.
Yeah, I've seen it. I shouldn't show you guys this, but I'm going to show you something, but don't tell anyone. This is just between us. I've seen people do slip, slip, knit where they slip the first one as if to purl, or maybe I'm doing it backwards, and then the second one as if to knit, and then when you knit them together, it's supposed to lay flatter. Have you done that before, Claire? So I've heard people say it lays flatter.
I think I've done a variation on that where you just slip the first stitch and
As
then slip the first stitch as if to knit, and then
the second one as if to purl.
No, and then put that stitch back on the left-hand needle and then knit both of them together.
Also, you twist it and then.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so we shouldn't be showing you guys these things, because these are unofficial. Like, you guys are getting the unofficial version of this. So, but I do like my students to realize that as soon as you learn a stitch and you get really comfortable with it, you're going to have the opportunity to learn variations of that stitch. People are going to have changed it. There's so many different ways of doing every different technique that you can always have something new to learn. And don't let people come up to you and tell you you're doing it wrong, because maybe that's just the way you want to do it. So lots and lots of different ways to do every technique in knitting. Any other questions? Do we want to look? Are we ready to look at the pattern? Are we ready to move on? I don't want to go too fast.
Let's go ahead and check out this pattern.
All right, so there's a few more things we're going to learn as we talk about the pattern. Oops, sorry. Let me get to the right pattern. So this pattern is a free pattern. It's free on lionbrand.com. And it's just called the Heartland Thick and Quick Level 3 Mittens. And it gives you this for adult sizes. It gives you the measurements, the materials that it's calling for. It's calling for Lion Brand Heartland Thick and Quick in redwood. But that's not what have used to make it. I used this hometown bonus bundle. So this is the yarn I used. I changed the yarn. And I like to do that in my classes because I want my students to also know that you don't always have to do everything you're told. I don't like to be told what to do. And so I'm going to do whatever I want, basically. So if you want to change the yarn, feel free to change the yarn. But I know a lot about both of these yarns. And Lion Brand Heartland Thick and Quick is a number 5 yarn, but it's a very thick number. It's quite on the thicker side of a number 5. And Hometown is a number 6 yarn. So they're very, very close in thickness. So I understand that you can trade those pretty evenly without making too many adjustments. So another thing you want to make sure of when you're changing the yarns is you want to double check the yardage. So I know that this ball of yarn is more of a standard size ball of yarn, whereas the Hometown Thick and Quick has a lot of yards. So I know I'm going to have plenty of yards. So before you make yarn changes, double check the thickness of the yarn and the gauge, and double check the yardage to make sure you're not going to run out. So they're two very important things if you're making changes, which I encourage. So you're going to need Lion Brand knitting needle size 9 and 10. Okay, that sounds crazy. This is super bulky yarn and it calls for a size 13. So what crazy person decided we're going to use a 9 and a 10? The reason we're doing that is because for mittens, you want them to be knitted at a very tight gauge because you really want to keep your hands warm. So if you're skiing or if you're in a snowball fight, or maybe you're just going on a long walk, you're walking the dogs and it's really windy out, you don't want the wind blowing right through your mittens. You don't want the wet snow soaking right through your mittens immediately. You'd like to be able to have a little time. So if you knit it at a tighter gauge with a smaller needle, then it closes up that knit and makes it very tight and it protects your hand much better. So that's why, and it seems like a pretty big drop from a size 13 down to a 9. And we do the ribbing on a much smaller needle and then go up one size for the body of the mitten. And that you'll frequently see that when you're doing ribbing. You have the ribbing on a smaller size, and then when you start the body of the garment, you'll go up a size. And that happens a lot with sweaters when you're making the sleeves of sweaters. And that way, when you push up the cuff, it'll stay up on your forearm and it doesn't always fall down. So that's why that is happening. And we need stitch markers, we need stitch holders, and a large-eyed blunt needle. So it's like a recipe. Before you start, you want to make sure you have what you need. You don't want to get halfway in and realize you don't have what you need. So this gives the stitch explanation. We're going to be using Make One, we're going to be using Knit Two Together, we're going to be using SSK. So we just learned about these. So let's, we'll just jump right into the mitten. So we're going to start with the cuff. So frequently a pattern will tell you where you're starting. And with smaller needles and leaving a long tail cast on 26 stitches. So that sounds easy enough. Row 1, and they're telling you that row 1 is the right side row. Let me see if I can get this to focus. So row 1 is the right side row. That's what RS stands for. And at this point, you might want to put a safety pin to mark the right side from the wrong side. And that might help you keep track. It's not a bad idea when you're learning. You're going to do knit 2, purl 2, and then you're going to repeat from the asterisk to the last 2 stitches ending with a knit 2. So whenever you see an asterisk, like right there in front of the knit 2, it almost always means you're going to repeat something, but anytime you have any punctuation in a pattern, it means something's going to happen. You need to read it carefully. So just double check if you see parentheses or brackets or anything. And now we're going to go to row 2. We're going to purl 2, knit 2, and we're going to repeat from the asterisk to the last 2 stitches, ending with a purl 2. So what's happening here is we're working on ribbing. We're doing knit 2, purl 2 ribbing. And if you saw the class last week, then you know that knit 2, purl 2 ribbing is created by, we stack all the knit stitches on top of knit stitches and all of the purl stitches on top of purl stitches. So once you establish your knit 2, purl 2, you want to make sure that you're looking at your stitches and you're making that decision am I looking at knit stitches? So I'm going to knit. Am I looking at purl stitches? So I'm going to purl. And if you're looking at knit stitches and you feel like you should be purling, maybe you've kind of got off count or you've lost track, and you might need to take some stitches out and get back on track. So don't just blindly knit, knit two, purl two, knit two, purl two. Look at your work and see what you're doing. You know, you want to pay attention. Everyone makes these mistakes. That's why I'm pointing them out. People, that's the very common mistake. You get off track by one stitch, and now your knit two, purl two rib has turned into seed stitch or moss stitch or something, and which is a nice stitch, but if you're not wanting that, then you're not going to be happy. So just double check, make sure you're on track. You're going to repeat these 2 rows 6 more times. So you're repeating both rows. You're repeating 2 rows 6 times. So it's actually, you're going to have 12 rows in total. So it's not, you just want to make sure you're reading it carefully. You're not doing 6 rows total. You're repeating 2 rows 6 more times. So you're going to do 12 more rows. So 6 more times will equal 12 more rows. So you'll actually have 14, it looks like. You're going to change to the larger needle, but let me just jump back there. If you repeat it 8 times, or if you repeat it 4 times, maybe you don't like ribbing and you just want a short ribbing, or maybe you want really long ribbing to cover your wrist and you might choose to repeat it 12 times. You know, these changes are decisions you can make. So you don't have to get caught up on doing everything exactly how it's written. So the next row, you're going to knit 13, make 1, and knit 13. That sounds really easy, right? Make 1, we know how to do that. And if you really hate make 1, you could just go ahead and do KF and B, right? And you'll just end up with a little bump and the whole world will just keep moving forward and nobody will ever know. You're going to work stockinette stitch for 5 more rows. So stockinette stitch means you're going to knit 1 row and purl 1 row. So you're going to knit all the way across. When you get all the way across, you're going to turn your work and you're going to purl all the way back. So we're going to put all of our knit stitches on one side and all of our purl stitches on the other side. So when we were working on ribbing, that was a reversible fabric. So the front and back pretty much look the same. But now that we're working on stockinette stitch, we need to make sure we know which is the right side and which is the wrong side. So earlier when we put that safety pin in place, that will help you keep track. And make sure for this pattern, we have our knit stitches on the right side. All right, so once you do that, 5 more rows, you're going to start your thumb gusset. Now, a thumb gusset is what creates the space for the thumb. So if you know anything about sewing, gusset is usually a triangular piece of fabric that is inserted to create space and shaping. So you're going to have these gussets come up in your knitting and possibly in sewing if you do sewing. And you can see right here, we've created in this fabric this triangular shape. And when we fold it in half, you can see that's going to, it branches out this way, just the same way that your thumb branches out. So that is going to be your thumb gusset. And this is not the mitten, this is just a little sample. Once you finish, I do have a picture of them. I do have a finished mitten, so we'll talk about that later, but this is just a little sample showing the gusset. All right. So we're going to thumb gusset, row 1, right side. You're going to knit 13, place a marker, make 1, knit 1, and then make 1. So that sounds like a lot. So let's look at it again. We're going to knit 13. That's easy. We're going to place the marker, and all you do to place a marker is just pop that marker right on your right-hand needle. Now we know how to make 1. So make 1, knit 1, make 1. So that's actually pretty easy when we just think about it. So make 1, knit 1, make 1. Place the marker and knit 13. Okay, so that sounded really confusing at first, but when you look at it one at a time, actually pretty easy. So row 2 and all wrong side rows, we're going to purl. So we're not going to hear anything else about the wrong side rows anymore. Every time you come to a wrong side row, you're just going to purl back across. It's almost like a little break, like you don't have to worry about anything happening, you just purl across. So row 3, you're going to knit to the marker. So you're going to keep knitting until you get to that marker. You're going to slip the marker. You're going to make one, which we just learned how to do, make one. Then you're going to knit to the last stitch before the second marker. So you're going to knit across, you're going to slip this marker, you're going to make one, and then you're going to knit all the way across until you get one stitch before the second marker. Make sure, one stitch before the second marker, and then you're going to make one and then knit one. So you're going to make one right here and then knit one, and then you're going to slip the marker and knit to the end. We're going to repeat rows 2 and 3 until there are 11 stitches between the markers. So here are my markers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. I finished it. So this is finished. I'm glad there was 11. I really had no idea how many there was going to be because I made this a long time ago. So now I know I'm finished because I counted my stitches. Okay, so let's just stop right here for a second because we've covered a lot. Are there any questions about this very confusing but yet easy pattern? So, or any particular technique or any of the lines standing out as being particularly confusing?
We do have a couple questions. Since this pattern just says M1, which version of make one would you use?
I would use the standard version, which is make one left, which is the first one we showed you. If it just says make one, you use the standard version, make one left.
And then is there a reason why patterns will have like a plain row between your increase row or your decrease rows?
You mean like the purl row where you do nothing?
Exactly.
Well, if you increased on the front and the back, then it would increase very fast, and it would probably you'd be done it would be increased very fast, and you wouldn't have as far up to go, and you would be done you only go halfway up. But when you increase every other row, it changes the angle of the triangle, and you increase, and it gives you a higher rate here, a higher rise right here. Sometimes in socks, and depending on if you have thick yarn or thin yarn, you might increase every row, or you might increase every 5 rows. It just depends on how the item is going to be shaped. So that's what will create the shaping. And if you're just doing a practice swatch, go ahead and practice knit, increase every row on one swatch and increase every other row on the next one and every 3 rows on the next one, and you'll see how it shapes differently. So it depends on the finished shape of the item, really. Wouldn't you say, Claire?
Yeah, that's a good explanation. Mm-hmm.
Any other
And
questions?
instead of make one in this pattern, you could certainly substitute knit front and back, right?
Yep. Knit front and back, make one left, make one right. You just live your life, live your best life, and do whatever you want. I'm a big fan of doing whatever I want.
Just remember, if you choose to use the knit front and back, you'll get that little sort of row of bumps going up,
which doesn't bother me. Yeah. Also, if you change the pattern, any changes you make to the pattern, you should write them down on the pattern. And then if you want to make it again, you'll look at that and then you can decide, oh, that didn't work out so good, I'm not going to do that again. Or maybe it was your favorite thing. So, always make notes on your pattern so you know the next time, maybe you want to do it again, or maybe you want to make additional changes. So, anything else?
We didn't have any other questions on the pattern, but we had a couple questions on some increases that we didn't cover during class. But if we've still got some pattern to cover, I'll wait on those.
Let's wait on those because you can't learn every increase in one class. So keep going until there are 11 stitches in between the markers. And then you're going to purl the last row. And then we're going to start the palm of the mitten. So the next row, you're going to knit to the marker, remove the markers, slip the next 11 stitches onto a stitch holder, move the second marker, knit to the end. So I do want to show you something here. I'm blocking my own light. So, great. So quickly, I'm going to knit to the marker. If I know how to knit, let's see if I can. Okay, so. And this is why I don't have a full project for this sample, because I can knit across much faster with a little piece. So knit to the marker, remove the marker. Now stitch holders, this is one version of a stitch holder. They look like a large safety pin. Sometimes they look like a wire that kind of connects. So there's different ways of having them. But instead of stitch markers, I prefer to just put my stitches on waste yarn. So what I'm going to do is just use my large-eyed blunt needle and just some scrap yarn. And I'm going to just transfer them one at a time onto my needle. So you want to slip them onto your needle as if to purl, because we're not trying to twist these stitches. So slip them as if to purl. So 11 stitches. You can do them 2 at a time, 1 at a time, but just make sure you're not twisting them. Make sure you're not splitting them. I'm almost splitting them. Okay, I've got my 11 on. Get rid of that. Pull them onto the yarn. And now I'm going to tie this in a secure knot, leaving it, enough slack in it so I can see what I'm doing. So I just tied it in like a square knot, and I'm going to cut my slack. And so what you want to do is tie it in a knot, but you don't want to cinch it down tight. You want to make sure you leave plenty of slack so that your gusset can remain open. And then you're just going to finish knitting to the end. So I'm not going to bore you with that. The reason I like to do the scrap yarn instead of a stitch holder, is that the scrap yarn is flexible. And if I'm putting this in and out of a knitting bag as I'm working on it, it's not, the stitch markers sometimes come open. If I want to try this on to see how it looks, it's not going to let me because the stitch markers are going to hold it out stiff and rigid. And so it wouldn't allow me to try it on because it's going to be holding it on this metal. So I really prefer what do you like a stitch mark or a stitch holder, Claire, or do you like scrap yarn?
No, I like scrap yarn too.
I'm a big fan of the scrap yarn. All right, so that's how I do that. Very easy. It might sound complicated your first try. So the next row, you're going to knit to the marker, remove the markers. Oh, we already did that, so keep going. Continue in stockinette stitch until the palm measures 4 inches. Ending with a wrong side row and place a marker between the 2 center stitches. So you're just going to keep knitting until the palm measures about 4 inches. Now, if you have a friend, or if you're making this for someone that has very large hands, maybe you'll go 5 inches, or maybe you'll go 3 inches if you have small hands. So, double check that. Ending with a wrong side row, and then you're going to place a marker right in the center. So you're going to count all your stitches, divide it by 2, and put a marker to divide them. And then you're going to, so we're going to shape the top, and what that is telling us is, so we're going to make this kind of point, this kind of dome shape at the top, so it has a nice smooth finish. We're going to knit 1, SSK, knit to 3 stitches before the marker, knit 2 together, knit 1, slip the marker. Now that's a lot, but we know how to do each one of those things. So if we take them one at a time, we'll be fine. So we're going to slip the marker, we're halfway. Knit 1, SSK, knit to the last 3 stitches, knit 2 together, knit 1. So these 2 sets of instructions are pretty much the same. So, once we sort through the first one, we get to the second one, we're home free. So don't don't get bogged down in all of that. Just focus on doing one at a time. We know how to do each one of those, so it'll be okay. We're going to purl the next row. And then we're going to repeat the last 2 rows 3 more times, and we should end up with 15 stitches. The next row, we're going to knit 1, SSK, knit 2 together. We're going to remove the marker, and then we're going to SSK twice. So you're going to SSK, SSK, 2 right next to each other, knit 2 together, knit 1, and you'll have 8 stitches. And then you're going to purl 1 more row, and then you're going to cut the yarn, leaving a very long tail, and we're going to use that tail for seaming. So this is kind of what situation you'll be in. And you're going to cut your yarn, leaving a very long tail. And kind of how we put the thumb stitches on scrap yarn, we're just going to slip stitches one at a time, slipping as if to purl. You can do 2 at a time, you can do 1, whatever. Just don't drop any, don't let any drop. Pull it through. And then you're going to cinch this up as tight as you can because that's going to close up the top of your mitten. All right. So after you've cinched that up, you go ahead and kind of, go through here one more time and just kind of cinch it up really tight so that it doesn't open. And then we're going to work on seaming it. So I'm not going to close this really securely because I'm going to use this in another class, but what I would do was I would go through here and maybe loop it just really tight so it doesn't open again. So the seam that I'm going to show you now is called mattress stitch. And I want to show it to you in a different color yarn so you can see what I'm doing. So you're going to find your stitches. And so this is my knit stitch, and then this is the next row over. And you want to find these bars that are in between our stitches. This is the same bar that we used for make 1. And this time we're just going to go under that bar. And over here, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to find that bar and go under it. And then once we've established it, we're just going to go to the knot bar right above it. And this is called mattress stitch. Did they really use this on mattresses, Claire, do you think, or what?
I don't know where the name came from, actually. They could
Go
have.
Go in a straight line going up. So you can see here, this is the next one. You don't want to jump over here. You want to make sure you're following your line, going up. And you're probably thinking, this looks like a horrible seam. Why would we want to do something like this and have this crazy looking seam? But if you know any magic words, you can say abracadabra, and when you pull it tight, it disappears. It disappears and goes right away, and you can't even see that there is a seam there. And when you turn it inside out, then you can see your seam. So this is called mattress stitch. And it's it works best with stockinette stitch, but you can do it with other stitches as well. Now for the thumb, you're going to want to put these stitches back on your needle. So you want to start from the left-hand side and put them on the needle. Slip them one at a time. And I usually leave my scrap yarn in place until I'm completely finished knitting my thumb and have it seamed and everything's done. Because if you've made a mistake and you want to rip that thumb out, then this scrap yarn will act as a lifeline and it won't allow your stitches to unravel. So I just kind of leave that in the back out of the way. If you take this out and then you've made a mistake and you rip out the thumb, you run the risk of ripping it out like down into your gusset. And if you rip it out down into the gusset, it's very hard to fix. So it's nice to leave that in as a lifeline. And so all you're going to do then is just follow the directions. You're going to reattach your yarn. I'm just going to reattach some yarn. I'll just use the spray. So what it's telling us is, for the thumb, with right side facing, return the stitches from the holder to the large needle, join yarn, knit across, work 4 rows in stockinette stitch, so total of 5, work 4 more rows. The next row, you're going to knit 1, SSK twice, knit 1, knit 2 together twice, knit 1. You're just closing up the top really quick. And again, with cutting the yarn and leaving a long tail, and we're going to, so you would cut the yarn and leave a long tail, close it up exactly the same way we did the top of the mitten, and then you want to seam that thumb. But I want to spend a few minutes here talking about when you put the thumb back on your needles. So you want to make sure when you start knitting that you're looking at knit stitches, because you want to make sure that you're working in stockinette. You don't want to do it wrong. If you put your stitches through your needle this direction, what's going to happen is when you try to knit, you're going to be on the purl side, and you don't want to start knitting on the purl side and throw yourself off. So just give it 1 second before you start and make sure you're looking at knit stitches, and then you can go ahead and start knitting following the directions. Now, if you put the needle on backwards, this direction, which for some reason makes more sense to me, that's how I did it when I first did this pattern. And I realized I was looking at purl stitches. I mean, you're fine, but if you're looking at purl stitches, then you're just gonna, the first row is just gonna be purl, right? Because we know stockinette stitch is all purls on one side and all knits on the other side. So just make sure you take a minute, see what side of the fabric you're on, and then work in stockinette stitch correctly, either knitting or purling, whatever situation you're in, okay? Any questions about that? Or about anything? We're a little over, but we did start a little late due to technical difficulties. How are we doing, Claire? What questions came in?
I think we are good. I know probably some people had to leave, but hopefully they remembered that they're going to have this recording to watch so that they can check out anything they missed. Oh, we do have a question when you're picking up for the thumb. Obviously, you're going to have tails there. So how do you join the yarn, or how do you deal with those tails?
Well, you're just going to weave in the tails just the same way you weave in all other of your ends. So again, you're just going to start knitting just like normal, just like adding a new ball of yarn. And then every time you add a ball of yarn, you're going to have a tail to weave in. So once you start knitting and knit a couple of rows, you can either weave that in or wait until the end to weave it in. So yeah, you will have ends to weave in, which is nobody's favorite, but you know, it's part of it. Okay, anything else? And then this is what it will look like when it's done. And you can lay your hand out and kind of decide, you know, how big should the mitten be, or how long should it be shorter. You know, after you make the first one, you can feel free to make a lot of changes if you need to. You wouldn't even have to do the top. You could just get to here, and instead of doing any of your decreases, just bind off. And then now you have fingerless mittens so that you can still use your thumb, or still use your phone. Like you can, you know, have your fingers free to use your phone. So all kinds of ideas. All right. So keep practicing. The more you practice, the more you're going to feel comfortable, and the more natural it'll feel in your hand. And the more practice you do, the more your gauge will even out and your stitches will start to look really, really nice. And the only way to do that is just keep practicing. And if you're practicing too much and it's not fun anymore, put it away and then wait until you want to do it again. It should be fun. You should be having a good time while you're doing it. So if you do run into questions as you're practicing, you can contact me on Instagram. Maybe Claire will put my Instagram name in the chat. It's Mr. Woolly Bear, M-I-S-T-E-R spelled out, and then Woolly Bear. And on Facebook, you can send me a direct message as well. It's just my name, just the way it shows up, Darren Morris. Just, you know, send me a direct message either on Instagram or Facebook, and I can respond. And I don't get many questions. Sometimes, usually I don't get hardly any. So I can usually respond to them pretty quick. So don't feel bad about sending me a message. All right, keep practicing and have fun knitting. Bye.